Welcome everyone to Daf Yomi, 1 week at a time, Masechet Nedarim. This is our 11th shiur, and if you guys are keeping track, we have 2 more weeks till the end of the Masechet. So we are almost finished with Masechet Nedarim, which is very exciting. Um, Okay, let's begin. Today we're going to be reviewing Daf 70 through 77. So let's begin with Daf 70. We were talking about last week, we discussed the idea of the husband or the husband to be and the father being able to revoke a vow that's made by the woman. The woman is, I guess she's really a girl, and she is betrothed to this man, right? They're not yet married. The Hebrew word for what they do is called hafara. They are mefer her neder. That means to cancel it, to revoke it, as opposed to metir, lehatir the neder. That means to annul. That is done by a panel of 3 people or one person who is very wise. And we have discussed that previously. We're gonna get back to it at the end of today as well. But it's important to understand that it's 2 different mechanisms, right? Hatara and hafara. Hafara, to revoke the vow, is only done by the father when the girl is in his home, and when she becomes betrothed, it's the father and the husband to be. And when she gets married, it is only her husband. So that's important to understand the distinction. Daf 70 asks, what if one of them, the father or the husband, um, confirms her vow, however, does it in an implied way? So let's just take a step back. We talked about revoking the vow, but if they hear about it and they're fine with the vow, they confirm the vow, they allow it. So what if the husband or the father says, um, your vow is confirmed only for today? That seems to imply that they want to revoke it tomorrow. Now, the problem is they do not have any power to revoke it tomorrow. They can only do that today. So the question is, does this work? Or the flip side, what if they say it's revoked tomorrow? Now, that also is problematic because if you're revoking the vow, it needs to be done today and for today. Um, so the Gemara asks, right, does this implied way of saying it, does that work? So the Gemara says, what if the person said, maybe that does work, but what if someone said, sorry, maybe that doesn't work because we're talking about already tomorrow, and we'll see, we did mention this last week as well, the husband and the father only have that day, meaning the day that they heard about it, is the day that they can either confirm the vow or revoke it. They have no power the next day. Once it gets to the next day, that's it. Um, what if, a different question, what if they say it's upheld for an hour, right? Does that work? Right? Maybe it's upheld for an hour, and now since you still have a few more hours of today, maybe then you can revoke it. Um, what if, right, let's say the wife says she wants to be a Nizira, a Nazarite, right? That's the next Masechet. We're going to talk a lot about being a Nazir. So a Nazir can be male or female, which is very important to understand. So let's say she says, I want to be a Nizira, and then he says, me too, right? Meaning he himself wants to as well. The question is, once he says, I also want to be a Nazir, is it that he's confirming her vow, right? Because he just said, me too. Or can he now turn around and say, but now I don't want you to be a Nazir anymore, right? I revoke your vow. Um, so the Gemara seems to say that it doesn't prove that um, if he confirmed it for an hour, he cannot revoke it afterwards. We're not sure, and we're left with a question in the Gemara. The next Mishnah on Daf 70 gives us another case, right? Again, as we mentioned, we're talking about a girl that is betrothed, and um, now the father, let's say the father dies, and the husband, so now again, I say the word husband, but it's not husband, it's the betrothed. In Hebrew or in the Gemara, the term is arus, right? Because erusin means engagement. So he is the arus and she is the arusa. So if let's say again we said the father and the husband together revoke the vow. So now, let's say the father dies. The Mishnah tells us the father doesn't, sorry, the father died. The arus, the husband to be, does not get all of the control or the ability to revoke her vow, and therefore he can't do it alone, and her vows, you know, stay the way they are. What if the husband dies? The husband to be, if he dies, the father does get all the ability to revoke the vow. So the Mishnah says from here we see that the father is stronger than the husband to be because he just got the ability to revoke on his own. The Gemara says, right, why is this the case? Because, sorry, um, um, sorry. Let's take a step back. The Mishnah just said the father is stronger because he now has the ability to revoke it on his own. The Mishnah then continues, however, there is a case where the husband is stronger. The husband is stronger because he can revoke the vow of his wife when she is an adult, whereas the father, once the girl becomes 12 and a half, he can no longer revoke her vows, even if she is unmarried. So we see that each one has, is stronger in a different case. Now the Gemara explains, right? The verse there. This is all based on a biblical verse, on a pasuk that teaches that the father's ability isn't transferred to the husband. But there's another verse. Sorry. There is another verse that teaches that the husband's ability is transferred to the father, right? And even the Gemara continues, even for vows that the husband heard before he died, even though he had that ability and he didn't do anything with it, if he dies in the interim, the father now does have that ability. The Mishnah mentioned that when the girl becomes a woman, right, becomes an adult, so the Gemara now tries to understand what the case is. Is it that the girl was 12 when they became betrothed and she becomes an adult when they were already engaged? Or maybe it's that the man already the man already betrothed an adult woman. So that is the case in the Gemara. 1 second. Okay. Next Mishnah, Daf 71. If a betrothed woman made a vow and then got divorced, now if you remember, we did learn that when a man and a woman are betrothed, then you don't just, it's not like nowadays when you have an engagement and you break off the engagement. Nothing, you don't have to do anything, you just break it off. If there is kiddushin, you actually need a divorce, which is why we only nowadays only do kiddushin under the chuppah. Because we don't want, unfortunately, there are broken engagements, and we don't want for the couple to have to get divorced. Therefore, we put it all together at the wedding ceremony. But here, the Mishnah describes a case where the betrothed woman made a vow, she got divorced, then she got engaged again on the same day. She was very busy, but on the same day. So now, who can revoke her vows? So the Mishnah teaches us her father and the current arus, right? The current husband to be can revoke it. Um, Again, as long as she did not get married in the meantime, and as long as she did not become an adult in the meantime. So the Gemara explains, right, the last uh, betrothed, right, the last arus, even if the first arus, meaning the first husband to be, heard about the vow, the next guy, or even if it happens a few times, I guess she's extremely busy. The last arus is the one who has the ability to revoke her vow. So too, right, if the arus died, let's say, and then she got engaged, so again, he can revoke it with the father. Okay, the Gemara continues. If the husband to be revoked, remember we said both of them, the father and the husband to be, need to revoke the vow together. It doesn't mean at the exact same time, and it doesn't mean um, like they have to be in the same room together, but it means that this on the same day they need to revoke it. So let's say the husband did revoke it, and then the father didn't hear about it, and then the husband died. Okay, so we have to kind of keep the story straight. So the Gemara explains the father, remember we said if the husband to be dies, the father gets all the power or the ability, and then the father can revoke the vow. This is according to Beit Shammai. Beit Hillel say he cannot till there is another arus, right? Till there's another husband to be, because the first husband to be revoked it and then he died, which means we need there to be two sides of this pair, right? The husband to be and the father. And if he died, so then it doesn't work. Say Beit Hillel. Beit Shammai say that, again, as we saw before, the husband to be's rights are transferred completely to the father, and the husband to be, when he revoked it, so he cuts away from the original vow, right? So again, let's think of it as a puzzle, right? There are two pieces, the father and the husband to be. They make a full, right, vow revoking pair, right? So the question here is, when one side revokes the vow, is it that they cut away one side of it and there's still a strong part of the vow, but it's half, right? It's just one side. That's one option. Another way to look at it is kind of this way, right? Let's say they're a team, but when one side does the revoking, right? So then they weaken the vow completely, right? So instead of it being right up here at 2, it gets down to 1. And now, right, the other side needs to finish it off. What's the practical application to this, right? So again, in our case, right, if the husband cuts away half of it, so then, right, now the father and the current husband to be can revoke it completely, right? As opposed to the other way around, and we'll get to this idea again in a minute. Let's say the husband to be hears about it, and then he divorces her, right? Is it right the fact that he divorced her? Is that him saying that I don't want this vow and it's revoked? Or is it upheld? Because he said, I don't want this type of woman. I'm divorcing you. Um, so now take another case. Let's say he divorced her and now he remarries her on the same day. Again, everything has to be on the same day because that's the only time that they have the ability to revoke the vow. So if he remarries her on that day, right? Again, can he now revoke the vow? That he didn't say anything beforehand. Can he revoke it afterwards? So if it's when he divorced her, it's as if he upheld or confirmed the vow. So then he cannot go back afterwards and try to revoke it, right? Meaning once it's upheld, that's it. Um, Now on Daf 72, the Gemara says it seems that our Mishnah is saying that if you um, right? It's like silence, right? If he, let's say, divorces her, it's like silence because we said the last one can revoke it. Remember, we said if there's more than one, so then the last one has the ability to revoke it. What does that mean that there's more than one? It means that they had to have gotten divorced. If they got divorced, again, remember we said if they get divorced, is it as if he's upholding the vow or revoking the vow? So this seems to say that he's not doing anything if they get divorced, and only the next husband to be will have that ability to revoke her vow. Um, Okay. Or the Gemara says maybe that's really not the case in our Mishnah because maybe we can construct a case that again they get divorced and she gets re betrothed. Um, so maybe it's that the first person did not even hear about the vow. So maybe we can't prove it from what we just said. Um, Okay. Another Breita says that if he divorces her and then he betroths her again, he can no longer revoke her vow. This seems to be saying that when he divorced her in the first place, it's as if he upheld the vow. Again, once you uphold it, you can no longer change your mind and try to be mefer. You cannot revoke the vow afterwards. The Gemara says, no, maybe the case is that they got married. Once they get married, and I think we learned this before, when as soon as they get married, the husband can only revoke a vow that was made when they were married. He has no control over a vow that she made before they were married. And maybe that is the case that we just mentioned. Next Mishnah. A father who was very learned said to his daughters, as long as you're in my house, all of your vows are revoked. And basically, men used to say to their betrothed, again, all of your vows are revoked till we get married. And then, right, when they get married, he can't revoke any of the vows made from beforehand. So it seems that this does work in terms of like a blanket statement. Um, so then the Gemara asks, is that really the case? Can a husband revoke a vow without ever hearing it? Right? He just said, any vow that you make while we're betrothed is revoked. That seems to say he didn't even hear it yet. If you didn't hear it, can you revoke the vow if you didn't hear it? So our Mishnah seems to imply yes. The Gemara says no, 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 no. When he said all the vows that you make are revoked, he really meant to say, as long as I hear about them first, right? When I hear about them, okay, now they're revoked, meaning only when he hears about it, that's when it goes into effect. Um, the Gemara continues that a husband cannot say, right, all your vows that you are going to make, right, in the future are upheld, right, till I get back from vacation, in the Bahamas, right? That does not work. There's no such thing as, um, well, we'll see, right? There's no such thing as upholding a vow in the future if you didn't hear it. Um, let's continue, right? There's a machloket if he can say, right, they're all revoked, meaning you cannot uphold a vow that doesn't exist yet. However, there's a difference of opinion, there's a machloket if you can revoke it before it was even made. And that we're not sure about. The Gemara says, again, maybe only, kind of retroactively. Once he hears it, then it becomes revoked afterwards. Now, the Gemara continues that a husband needs to revoke it personally. He cannot appoint an agent to do it for him, which is interesting. The Gemara says, wait a minute, but don't we know that when you have an agent, a shaliach, that agent is like yourself? And it seems that generally anything that you can do, you can get someone else to do for you, right? So then the Gemara says, you're right. Maybe a person can appoint a shaliach, an agent, in their place. Daf 73. Maybe this only works if the husband heard the vow. So how does it work? The husband says, I revoke all the vows you're going to be making, and he appoints someone to revoke it for him. Then he hears about it and he empowers that agent to revoke the vow on his behalf. Next question on Daf 75. Can a deaf husband revoke a vow? Right? Again, we just said the husband needs to hear it. We were talking about he needs to know about it, but maybe it means literally he needs to hear the vow, right? Now the Gemara is going to go backwards. If the husband doesn't need to hear the vow, again, not literally, but more figuratively, like hear about it. So then, if he doesn't need to hear about it, maybe he doesn't need to have the ability to hear it. Or, no, even if he doesn't need to know about it, he needs to have the ability to hear it. The Gemara says, no, right? It's based on the verse. The verse says, and the husband heard it, which implies that it needs to be, the person needs to have the ability to hear it. And therefore, if the husband is deaf, he cannot revoke the vow, which I think is, again, very interesting in terms of hearing and understanding. Next question, can the husband revoke the vows of two wives at the same time? Okay, now we're getting more back to like Yivamot. He has two wives. Can he revoke them at the same time? So the Gemara says, let's learn it from another case. The Gemara says that a man cannot make two wives at the same time drink the waters of the sota, right? The sota is a woman who is suspected of adultery, and she is brought to the temple, to the Beit HaMikdash, and she's made to drink this bitter water. So the Gemara says he cannot do it to two wives simultaneously. Therefore, maybe so too in our case, he cannot revoke two wives' vows. Again, it seems to say that the verse says she drinks in singular. So too with vows, it says he revokes her vow and not their vow, and therefore it does not work. Okay, the next Mishnah on Daf 73. A woman who waited 12 months to get married, or she became an adult, or um, she's a widow who only was waiting a month. Once that time period is over, remember we talked about this in Masechet Ktuvot, right? Let's say they would get engaged and they would have a month, a year to prepare. If that year is over, the husband, even if they don't get married yet, the husband now needs to support her because he had a deadline and he didn't make the deadline. So the Gemara says, because the arus, right, the husband to be, needs to support her, now he has the right to revoke her vows by himself because he is now supporting her. Or maybe no, they're not married yet. Only when they're married can he revoke her vows by himself. The Gemara continues, right? 12 months to prepare for marriage, and then the woman is supported by the arus, the husband to be. And at that point, if he is a kohen, a priest, so then she can eat truma. Right now, again, it used to be only, well, we'll get to that in a minute, right? But if she is doing yibum, right? So she cannot eat truma. Let's say she's doing yibum with again her husband's brother, who's a kohen. She has to wait till she gets married in order to eat truma. However, later on, the courts decided that a woman can never eat truma till she gets married, right? We're concerned that she's going to get confused, and therefore we say no, she can never eat truma. Maybe that idea is only about truma, but not about the vows. And maybe when they're already engaged, he can still revoke her vow. And then the Gemara says, um, maybe not, because women who take a vow do it based on the will of their husbands, and if they're not married yet, maybe she does not have that in mind. Okay, Daf 74. The Mishnah, so since we mentioned yibum, let's go to a shomeret yavam. This phrase should sound familiar from Masechet Yevamot. The Shomeret Yavam is the woman who's waiting to do yibum, right? She was married to a man. They did not have any children. The man died, and now she needs to marry his brother. So the Mishnah tells us her Yavam, right? Again, the brother can revoke her vow, right? He's like a betrothed man. Um, and then the first opinion in the Mishnah is Rabbi Eliezer. He says, even if there are a few brothers, right, one of the brothers has the ability to revoke her vows. Or opinion number two is Rabbi Yoshua, only if there is one Yavam, right, which is more similar to a betrothal situation. And therefore, only if there's one Yavam, one brother, then he can revoke her vow. Third option is Rabbi Akiva. He says, no, even if there's one, even if there's two, none of them can do hafara, meaning none of them can revoke her vows. That's only reserved for her betrothed, but not for her yavam. Okay, so then the Mishnah continues, right? Is the yavam like a husband, or maybe not, because there are multiple brothers, right? Multiple people can do yibum, right? And again, as we said, what if there's only one yavam? Maybe still it's not the same connection, right, to each other like kiddushin, right, like the betrothal. Okay. The Gemara now says that um, it seems to be that Rabbi Akiva, who said that neither one or nor two brothers, right? The Yavam can never do, he can never revoke the vows. So we're going to say, why is that? And now we're going to um, go back to kind of remember things that we learned in Masechet Yevamot. If you remember, there was a word called zika. Zika meant that there was a bond between the woman, right, the widow, and the brother, the yavam. And we always went back and forth. Is there this bond or isn't there this bond? There's definitely a relationship, but how strong is that relationship? So it seems from our Mishnah that Rabbi Akiva says the bond isn't as strong. That's why he can't revoke her vow. So that seems to say Ein Zika, right? There is no bond like this. Rabbi Yoshua seems to say there is Zika when there was one Yavam, right? They're very closely connected. But what about with two, right? Again, that does not work. It only works if there it only works if there is one brother, or if there were two brothers, one of them needed to do ma'amar. Do you remember what ma'amar was? So ma'amar was almost like an engagement for the yibum process. Right? Instead of saying kiddushin, it's called ma'amar. Right? One brother says to the woman, I'm going to do yibum. Right? I'm prepared to do it. It's not the yibum process, but it is beginning the process. So if um, there were two and one of them did ma'amar, now there seems to be a stronger relationship, and now he can now revoke her vow. Um, okay, or again, maybe the case is that there were two Yivamim, right? There are two brothers, and they went to court, and the court decided that one of them was needed to do Yibum or Chalitza. Remember, we said generally the older brother, and then he ran away. So now he's forced to support her. Maybe now, because he's supporting her, he can revoke her vow. So that could be the case that we are discussing. So again, now the Gemara asks if one of the brothers does ma'amar. Again, this semi-betrothal for yibum. The Gemara asks, is it like erusin? Is it like they're engaged or betrothed? Or is it almost like they're married? And then the Gemara says, what's the practical application, right? In the Gemara language, we say, what's the nafkamina? Nafkamina means, what's the practical application? Because if it's as if they're engaged, so then the yavam and the father revoke the vow. However, if it's like being married, so then only the yavam would be able to, or would have the control or the ability to um, revoke the vow. So the Breita explains explicitly that Rabbi Eliezer meant that it only works if the yavam does ma'amar, and that creates the relationship. Rabbi Akiva says neither one nor two yivamim can revoke it because there is no distinction between different types of yivamim. Either it's for all of the men doing yibum or none of them. He doesn't make a distinction. Daf 75. Rabbi Akiva says that ma'amar is not strong enough to make the yivamah like a woman who is engaged, right? And therefore, it's not a strong enough bond. Okay, the next Mishnah on Daf 75 tells us, let's say the husband upholds all the vows that, again, she's going to make till he gets back from traveling. As we said, this does not work. But if he says that they are, um, sorry, again, right? He says that he wants to uphold all future vows. That does not work. If he wants to revoke all future vows, as we said, it's a machloket. Rabbi Eliezer says it works because it should be easier to revoke, right, to get rid of a vow that never existed than, right, a vow that already exists. Therefore, it should work. The sages, Chachamim, say the husband has the power to uphold or revoke, and only vows that can be upheld can be revoked, meaning they have to already exist in order to do either one of those actions. So the Gemara explains on 75. When we say that it doesn't work, what does that mean? Does it mean that the vow goes into effect and then it becomes revoked, right? Or does it not exist at all, right? We already cut it off before it even existed. And again, what's the nafkamina? What's the practical application? Because, right, let's say somebody says, again, the case of is the woman says, I want to be a Nazir, or Nazira is more correct. And another person says, me too. Now, me too has to be that the original vow has to exist for at least a second in order for the second person to be able to make another vow. So, does this, again, if it exists and then it gets canceled, then it works. But if it doesn't exist at all, so then it doesn't work, right? Or maybe we compare his own vows to her vows, right? He can say, any vow that I take in the future will not exist. So too, maybe he can say the same thing for his wife. Any vow she takes in the future will not exist. So the Gemara says, no, those are two separate vows. His vows are very different than him being able to revoke her vows, right? Again, maybe her vow does not exist even for a moment. Sorry, or maybe it does exist for a moment. Um, so the Gemara brings a case of the mikvah, right? The ritual bath that purifies a person, but it can't purify a person, for the future. It can only purify a person in that moment, right? So too, maybe here, right, he can only revoke a vow that is going to, again, maybe it has to exist in order for him to um, revoke it. And the Gemara ends with the answer is that a woman's vow does not take effect at all, meaning if he says they're all revoked, so then they don't even come to effect at all. Daf 76 says, no, the opposite. It does go into effect for a moment, and then it becomes revoked, right? Either way, the sages disproved Rabbi Eliezer, and that is the end of that discussion. Okay. However, the sages do agree that things that can be put, um, okay, things that can put an end to something can be done preemptively, right, before they exist. But here with vows, right, this is based on a verse, and therefore you can only revoke it once it's made. You cannot revoke it before it even exists. And that seems to be the end of the discussion. Next Mishnah on Daf 76. A husband and the father, again, I keep saying husband, but husband to be, the arus and the father, have the whole day that they hear about it in order to revoke the vow. Sorry, this also could be the husband, meaning if they're married, then the husband by himself has the day that he hears it. Now, what does it mean, the day? right? So the Mishnah says this is a leniency and a stringency. A stringency. How? If it basically means till the day's end, meaning if he heard it on Friday night, right? Let's say he heard about this vow on Friday night, he has all of Shabbat to revoke it. But if he only hears it right before sunset, so then he only has moments to revoke it till he loses out on that ability. So now the Gemara says, when we said that day, does it mean, as we just said in the Mishnah, till sunset, or does it mean for 24 hours? Right? In the Gemara it says mi'et le'et, which means from this time to the next time, meaning from 2 p.m. today to 2 p.m. tomorrow. That is 24 hours. Or does it mean that day? So if you take a vow at 2 p.m., you have till, right, whenever sunset is, right? So till 4:30, 4:40, you only have 2 hours. So the Gemara says, based on the verses, it is only till the end of that day. And not only that, but you have the ability to revoke it at night, as I mentioned. If you hear that the vow took place, when you hear about the vow at 8 p.m. and it's past sunset, so now you have the whole night and the whole day to revoke it. So again, the law is till nightfall, and that is the end. Okay. Also, here the Gemara says that the sages allowed regret, right? Regret as an opening to annul a vow. Okay, now I'm talking about annulling a vow. This is not what we were talking about before. This is, I regret that I took the person by themselves asks either one sage or wise person or 3 people to annul their vow. There's a machloket if you can use regret as a strong enough petach, as a strong enough opening to annul a vow. So here the chachamim, the sages say that regret is strong enough to annul a vow. Therefore, right, we see that we're very lenient with annulling vows. Okay, last daf 77. The Breita tells us that you can revoke a vow on Shabbat. Again, to revoke mefer means to the husband or the father. And you can annul vows, right, to be matir, right? This is a regular person. You can annul a vow that applies to Shabbat on Shabbat, right? So we mentioned this before, right? Let's say a person says, I'm not going to eat meat. I'm not going to eat meat. But there is a mitzvah to eat meat on Shabbat, right? Or remember we saw, I'm not going to enter this building, and that big building becomes the shul. So you can annul that vow on Shabbat. Now the Gemara asks, what about revoking? Again, the husband and the father, can they revoke any type of vow on Shabbat? And the answer is yes, because they only have till nightfall. Remember, again, we said it's not 24 hours. Therefore, right, if they hear it, let's say Shabbat morning, they only have Shabbat to revoke the vow, and therefore they can revoke it on Shabbat, even if the vow has nothing to do with Shabbat. Okay, so now the Gemara talks about annulling a vow. You can annul a vow on Shabbat with one expert, but not with 3 regular people, because it looks like you're setting up a court, a beit din, and we know you're not allowed to have a beit din on Shabbat. Therefore, you're not allowed to annul your vow in front of 3 people. The Gemara says, no, maybe that's not the case, because it doesn't really matter. It doesn't look like a court case, because we see in the next line that you can revoke it at night. You can annul it at night. And we know you can't have a court case at night. Therefore, it doesn't look like a court case in any way. Right? You can even do it standing, right? It's not, you don't have to be seated. It's not so serious. Your relatives can be one of those three people. And then the the Gemara continues that it's very important to hold back from saying vows. If you take a vow, it's very serious, and it's seen as if you're sinning, even if you annul the vow, even if you mekayem, even if you do the vow, it's still not seen as a positive thing to do. The next question, what about, again, implying that you are revoking a vow, right? I don't want you to make any vows. That doesn't work, right? You need to be very clear. But you can imply upholding a vow, right? You could say, great job, way to go, right? That does work, but it's not strong enough to revoke the vow. The Gemara finishes up the daf by saying that on Shabbat, you should use different language instead of, right, again, revoking the vow upright, very clearly, because it's not really in the spirit of Shabbat. It's better to do it in a different way. So the Gemara says, right, the husband can say, right, let's say she says, I'm not going to eat meat, and he says, here's a hamburger, eat this, right? That seems to imply that he is revoking the vow. However, the Gemara adds, he needs to revoke it in his heart, which is interesting because usually we say thinking something is not enough. You actually have to verbalize it. It seems that on Shabbat, it is enough to think it, right, to do it in your heart, but it also needs to be accompanied by an action, right? Drink this, eat this, right? Then everybody understands what is going on. The last point on Daf 77 is that each person needs to use the correct language. Meaning, if you go to annul a vow and the chacham, the person says, I'm mefer your vow, right? I revoke your vow, that does not work. And vice versa, right? The husband cannot say, right, I am matir, right? I am annulling your vow. That is not his mechanism, right? Each person has a different mechanism. And the verse says, right, zeh hadavar, this is the way it should be, right? You have to use the proper language for your ability. And if you don't use the proper language, it doesn't work. Okay, with that, we finish Daf 77. Next week, we will be meeting at our regular time. And again, as I mentioned, we have 2 more lessons for Masechet Nedarim till we make our siyum for finishing Masechet Nedarim. I would also like to just say, I might have mentioned it last week, but we are at exactly 3 years ago that we began, for those of you who began learning at the beginning of the cycle, Masechet Brachot started 3 years ago. So if you can imagine that you've been doing this for 3 years, that is unbelievable. I can't believe it. So I can't believe I've been giving this shiur for 3 years. I said that I would only do it for 3 months. So, beware of what you say. But Baruch Hashem, it's really a zchut to be able to learn with all of you. And yeah, wishing everyone a wonderful week and see you next week. Have a good week, everyone.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you.